Hey, Easttown. My name is Greg Gibbs, and I may be an unfamiliar face to some of you, but I'm very happy to be the guest teacher today. I've been friends with Clint and Michael Dubin for a long time, and they've invited me to be along for this series called Heart Condition, where y'all are looking at generosity, one of my favorite topics. At Easttown, we always ask you to check in, and you do that via the text. You remember, if you've been here before, you text Easttown, EASTOWN, to 94000. And if it's your first time, they'll send you something. The first time I did this, they sent me a brand new Jeep. No, I'm just kidding. They don't do that, but they're also not creepy, but they will send you a gift, and then we'll know kind of who's hanging out with us today. So again, thanks for joining us on this video, and I am excited to jump into a topic that I think is kind of a loaded one for a lot of people. There's a lot of emotion around whenever the church talks about money. You know what's funny is when I got into ministry, I never thought I would do so much studying and thinking and praying and even writing about this topic. But what I learned as a pastor and now a coach to pastors is it's a big deal. It's a big deal because it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's financial. It kind of crosses every category, including relational, right? And it many times trips triggers inside of us, right? Maybe it trips a trigger for you because of a bad experience at a church, or maybe just a struggle in your own life. Do you ever identify with that? Like, I know some people who literally physically feel sick or angsty when the topic comes up, either in their home relationships or in their church. So one of the things we like to kind of remind ourselves of is let's just take a deep breath and recognize that this is a hard one to talk about. And yet, what I've come to realize is it's one of the keys to unlocking spiritual health and wholeness. It's like a really big deal. As a matter of fact, later I'm going to talk to you about how important it was to Jesus that his followers understood how either really good or maybe even toxic money can be in our lives. You do know that it's one of the least favorite topics for church leaders and pastors, right? But oddly, it was one of Jesus' most favorite topics. And so I always ask the question, why? Why is it the thing we like to talk about least, and yet Jesus would always seem to be wanting to bring it up with people and kind of see where they were at with this whole topic? You know, I have some things that I want to share with you about why I believe it's such a big deal in our spiritual lives. I want to do two things, and they're pretty simple, but at the same time, like, not easy to fully comprehend and execute in our lives. Here's the two things I want to do with you today. First, I just want to share with you what I've learned. I've been in and around the church for 30 years. That's my career. And I actually coach churches all around the country. So not only do I get to try to help, but also I learn a ton, right? So every time I'm with a different leader or different denomination or different church in a different part of the country, I get to ask and listen to kind of what God is doing in the hearts of those leaders in those churches. And so I've learned some things. So first, I want to share with you what I've learned. And then second, let's go to Jesus. Let's go to at least one of the places where he talks to us about the things that maybe worry us the most and how we can release those things. What I've learned about money is that in my own life, I can just talk about it personally, it feels like my heart or my sense of well-being has like there's like a cable that's tying my heart to my money. When it goes up and down, like it always does in our lives, I can either feel like I have a sense of being okay or satisfied with my life, and then all of a sudden something funky happens with money, and I'm insecure, or my wife and I have a really tense conversation about what we're spending or not spending. Can you relate to that? I think probably many of you can. I mean, I grew up in a family where my parents were really good at the generosity thing. I mean, they gave away pretty much everything they could. My parents had a policy where they would tell everyone in our network of friends, hey, our garage door is always open. You can just swing it up and come into the house, whether we're there or not. You can use the bathroom, open the fridge, whatever you need to do. So I did have like a pretty good upbringing around this topic, and yet it's not easy. It's not easy for people who have had a positive experience, and it's definitely not easy for maybe some of you who have had a negative experience around money. But here's the thing, when I'm coaching pastors, I always remind them that we have to talk about it because of what's real about being human. It's hard on relationships. It's the number one reason cited for marital strife that leads to separation and divorce. It's the reason why people who used to be best friends and went into business together now will never talk to each other ever again because of some money thing. It's the reason why siblings end up being at odds and not loving each other because of some weird thing that happened with an inheritance. It's the reason governments fight over land. It's the reason that businesses and banks and all the way down to my own human heart always has this struggle between fear and faith and greed and generosity. And you're hearing me make the point that I think you already know in your own heart. It's one of the trickiest things to navigate in our lives. So when I learned this, I say to pastors and leaders, don't not talk about it, because if you think about it, everyone who's coming to your church or listening to you teach online probably has some sort of tension in their life around this topic, and yet Jesus offers hope and offers us a new perspective. So let's talk about that really quick. Jesus was always talking about money. As a matter of fact, he talked about it more than heaven, hell, faith, pretty much everything. Why? Why was Jesus always talking about it? Because he wasn't fundraising. He actually never asked anybody for money. But what I think Jesus knew was that our spiritual condition, our ability to trust in something we can't see, like God, who is our provider, is very tied to what we think about what is in our hands. Do we hold clenched fist onto what we've been given, or do we open our hands and allow it to flow through us to other people in need, and also allow our hands to remain open so that God can continue to provide for us? So Jesus was always, the way I say it is, he was always kind of gently poking at someone's heart and saying, hey, why don't you give away all that money? He said that to a very wealthy person. He said, hey, just give that all away to the poor. What really Jesus was asking was, what are you depending on? Like, what do you think is going to bring you satisfaction or a sense of significance or well-being? Do you think it's money? Because money's kind of fleeting. And if we're not tied or tethered to something that's less fleeting than that, then we're going to end up probably in a bad spot. And so Jesus was always kind of asking people, hey, what are you depending on? Because if it's money, you're probably going to end up in a place of worry. I've been there. I mean, I have aging parents and in-laws. I have kids that are finishing up college. I'm thinking about my own retirement. Some of these things are kind of, quite frankly, first world problems, because there's a lot of people in the world that will never even see a retirement account. But at the same time, it's my reality, right? So I sometimes worry. And yet Jesus, when he was talking to people about kind of what's life all about, Matthew chapter 6, he says, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? And in a very famous phrase, Jesus said, look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? So Jesus asked a question and just kind of let it hang in the air. He said, do you think if God's going to take care of a bird, that God is not going to take care of you, a human that he created in his own image? And so what I've learned is Jesus knew that there was this dance constantly between fear and faith. Because it's kind of hard to believe that if I'm a generous person and give things away, that God's going to continue to fill up my hands. What if he doesn't? It's a real question. But faith says, man, I'm going to believe that the better way to live life is as an open-handed Jesus person, not as a clenched fist, keep it all for myself and my family. And so in operating in faith, you say, hey, I'm going to believe God. And I'm going to trust God, and I'm going to have my allegiance to that which I can't see, as opposed to having my allegiance to the stuff I can see right in my hands, right? That's what I'm going to depend on. So I think the best way to kind of learn this is just to kind of peer into the life of someone who's willing to talk about it. And so I want you to check out this video, because I'm really impressed with Jack and Hillary, because they're willing to share, really open up the curtain to the inside of their marriage and how money was kind of dragging them down. But once they found freedom around this topic and were able to release that into a generosity mode, It changed everything for them. So check this out.
I'm Jack Vonich.
I'm Hillary Vonich, and we have been married 29 years. We grew up in the Bay Area, went to middle school and high school together, and we have 2 girls, 22 and 20, and we're empty nesters.
I grew up going to church. I kind of went because my friends went, and it just never really connected for me. My faith journey changed after being married to Hillary. So Hillary had a great relationship with Jesus, and her modeling of it really affected the way that I looked at things. I think when it really started to really change was when we started to have financial issues. We had amassed $50,000 of credit card debt and had 2 car payments. So total debt was somewhere short of $100,000. And when we looked at our final bank statements and what we made on a monthly basis, we were pretty close to negative $1,200. So we were running towards the end of the line financially.
There was this pivotal moment for us in the bedroom that we're sitting in our bedroom and we're talking and we're crying and we're trying to figure out, like, what is going to happen to us? What's going to happen to our marriage? What's going to happen to our kids, our home, our house? It was kind of just this blow up moment. And we aren't fighters. Like, we aren't people that yell at each other. We're not people that get angry at each other. But this moment, there was anger and there was distrust and there were all these feelings that we had never shared or had together. And in that moment, it all came out. Yeah. And I think that was the moment that Jack knew Jesus had to be in the picture, and that was the moment I knew I needed to trust Jesus with Jack.
Hillary remembered that we had been given a book a couple years back by Dave Ramsey.
The book we had was The Total Money Makeover, and I can see his face on the cover.
Yeah, one of those early books that he had done that first outlined his steps, and Hillary went and found it and threw it at me.
I did throw it.
That was the one. That was the one time where I didn't take that as an offense. We were looking for whatever we could figure out, because at this point we're running on fumes. So literally read the entire book that day. By morning, we kind of had a plan, and we were going to try to figure this out and use some of his principles to make it work. Part of this is you have to take the whole message. You don't get to take pieces of things that you learn, right? And so when we're reading through Dave Ramsey's situation and his suggestions, one of the key things in the beginning is being generous. And for us, that was so far in the future, right? We're so far in debt now. There's no way we'll get to be generous in years and years. When we first entered this. But we quickly realized that your money and your situation it's all about connecting with Jesus and allowing Jesus to help you and working through Jesus with your funds. Generosity is just it's an external expression of your relationship. And it started to click that we needed to be generous even in debt. We had to start giving at least a little bit to demonstrate our faith and to trust. If we're going to trust him to turn this mess around that we've created for ourselves, we've got to be able to trust him and give some funds into the things that he's part of and what he's doing. So we started giving small amounts to our church beyond what we would normally just pull out of our wallet and drop in the offering basket as it went around.
I remember that first moment. I had something come up that was so outside of what our budget line said to do. And I remember coming to Jack and saying, babe, there's this gal that needs to go to this women's conference. And I didn't even know if I was going to be able to go. And I thought, she needs to go. Can we scholarship her? There's no money. The church doesn't have any money. Can we scholarship her and help her? And he goes, just do it. Just do it. And we did it. And it was amazing. And we never even noticed that money was gone because God just took care of it.
If you start to give, things happen that allow you to keep giving. It's like kind of when you trust in him to start to be generous, he takes care of it. And it just happens in the way that it needs to happen.
Here's the crazy thing that I think about when I think of freedom and generosity. The debt is like a backpack and it's holding you down. And you take that backpack off and you put it down and all of a sudden you can breathe and you feel great. Well, when you don't have debt and you have this freedom to give and to help other people bring them up or to help things happen. It is the most amazing feeling in the world.
It's about reflecting Jesus' love back onto other people. It's so easy to get caught up in your own things. When you recognize it and you realize that you can't be the center of everything, you need to reflect back what Jesus is. It's just it's a different way of living that's just so rewarding from both sides of it, because you feel as good as the people that are receiving the gifts. And when you do that without any expectation of return and those kind of things, it's fantastic.
That was great, wasn't it? I mean, it doesn't get more real than that, for them to be able to share with you, with all of us, kind of where it became really tense for them in their marriage, and then how God showed them a new way of handling money. I mean, that's why we're doing this series at Easttown, because we know that it's important, and it's probably affecting you, whether you reveal that or not, and it may be affecting your most closely held relationships, in terms of how you navigate life around this topic. I want to call you to some possible action, right? So this is the call to action. What if you tried some self-diagnosis? Remember at the very beginning I said, sometimes money trips triggers. Ask yourself the question, does that happen to me, and why? Like what's behind that? Is there some hurt that I need to maybe deal with, or is there some trust issue I have with the church or with God or whatever? And so this is a real part of maybe your spiritual journey, to start doing some self-diagnosis. The thing I love about this is that, yeah, of course, you can support Easttown with your generosity, but aside from Easttown, the whole Bible is filled with Jesus people being asked to take care of inequity, injustice. In other words, when we have resources, part of what God is doing is saying, bring heaven to earth and use your stuff to act like a Jesus person. And so be thinking about that too. Just number one, what triggers for me around the topic of money, or do I have a sense of kind of health around it? And then number two, am I bringing heaven to earth with the way I handle things? Am I being like a Jesus person in my neighborhood or in my family or in my community or really in the world? And then the other thing that I really want us to all think about is self-diagnosis about our hearts. Like what do I really prioritize, or what do I think really makes me a somebody, or gives me significance or satisfaction? The crazy thing is I'm talking to people, probably many of you have resources of some kind. Some have a little, some have way more than most people, right? I'm talking to people in America, probably for the most part, and many of us are employed. And yet, the wealthiest people statistically are the ones that give away the least. What is it about that? Like, I want you to ask yourself the question, what is it about the fact that in the last 100 years, American Christians have basically given away about 2% of their income, and the people that give away more are actually the ones that make less? What's the connection between having stuff and wanting to hold on to it so tightly that it actually chokes out the generosity that Jesus may have for all of us? So self-diagnosis, I'm not accusing anybody of anything. As a matter of fact, I do this all the time. And in my marriage with Andrea, we're always asking ourselves the questions, how can we be Jesus people to those that are in need? Now, like I said, this is not a fundraising video for Easttown, but I know a lot of you like to give to Easttown. Like, this is one of the places that you've decided is the recipient of your generosity. Or maybe you haven't started yet, and this is a way for you to test out living this new kind of attitude, not depending on or holding on to this stuff white-knuckled, but giving it away. And so if you want to, maybe you know how it goes. If you're new at Easttown, you text GIVE, GYVE, to 313131. And of course, if you ever have questions about any of that stuff, you can contact Clint or Michael or the folks that help lead Easttown, and they'll share with you kind of the way we manage money and spend money on serving our community, like you guys do all the time at Easttown, which is really cool about you. So thanks for listening. Thanks for letting me share. It's been a pleasure to hang out with Easttown friends once again. God bless.